Now You Know BC is brought to you by Return It. Don't trash your empty beverage containers. Return them for the deposit refund.
Welcome to Now You Know BC. I'm Bob Kronbauer, also known as BC Bob, and on this show I introduce you to interesting people, places to go, things to see, things that have happened in the past. You will hear our collective stories. This week, I'm telling you some about alcohol. From the fact that there's actually a lowest price for booze set by the government to one of the most interesting dudes you'd ever want to have a beer with. If you're watching this episode on its first run, right now it's 6 o'clock on a Saturday, and I hope you're in your living room or somewhere comfortable enjoying a nice cold beverage of some sort. I'd be with you, but last year I decided to quit drinking for a month and just kind of quit altogether by accident. I didn't go back. Did you know that the lowest price that stores are legally allowed to sell a 6-pack of beer for in BC is $6.38? It's true, $1.06 a can, $1.06 is the lowest legal price, which was set in 2016 when the government introduced a new pricing scheme, which is mostly meant to protect us from ourselves. Like if you could get a beer for 10 cents, would you maybe drink more of it? I know I would. The other prices that were set were $3.75 per liter of cider, $27.88 for a liter of spirits, and $6.44 for a liter of wine. That's $4.83 for a 750 ml bottle of wine. I've never been a big wine drinker, so maybe I haven't looked hard enough, but is there a bottle of $5 wine out there in BC? If you know where I can get one, let me know. Maybe I'll hop off this wagon and I'll do a review of it next season. Yeah, maybe not. I'll stay dry for you. I do this all for you. And speaking of dry, maybe you didn't know that BC had a prohibition period where it was illegal to drink alcohol here, much like it was in the States, but a little bit looser. That is, if you weren't Indigenous, in which case the rules were even more strict. In the 1800s, the Indian Act made it illegal for Indigenous people to consume alcohol in BC. And that was in place until 1951, when they loosened it so they could drink on reserve. It took until 1962 for the government to allow my Indigenous friends to drink where everyone else is allowed to drink. For the non-Indigenous population, like myself, prohibition was in place for a few short years, from 1917 until 1921. But like I said, there were a few exceptions, quite a few exceptions. People weren't allowed to drink unless they got a prescription for alcohol, which cost 50 cents to get, and which hundreds of thousands of people got over the 4-year period that we were a dry province. And while it was sort of illegal to drink, it wasn't at all illegal to produce it for export. So companies were still making booze here throughout Prohibition. One of the richest alcohol company owners in BC was a man named George C. Rifle, who owned a lot of other stuff, including the Commodore Ballroom. You might know him from the game preserve that's named after him, the George C. Rifle Bird Sanctuary out in Delta. His family were huge duck hunters. They donated a massive piece of their land to serve as a sort of duck sanctuary to make sure that there would always be ducks to hunt. If you're ever out there in the fall, take note of the sounds of shotguns going off in the distance. The sanctuary is located right in the middle of prime duck hunting territory, and as soon as they fly out of that space, they're often shot down by hunters. I am so sorry to be the one to deliver this information to you, but seriously, listen for the pops next time you're out there. One last story. Olympic figure skater Patrick Chan once got kicked out of the liquor barn on Cambie Street in Vancouver. I know that it's true because I was right there when it happened. I was there picking up some Hoyne Pilsner when I spotted him kissing with a young lady in the beer aisle. That's not why he got kicked out. I was like, hey, are you Patrick Chan? And it was one of those sort of, yep, I'm Patrick Chan moments where you just do awkward celebrity meeting and you don't know what to say. And I was just like, okay, thanks. And then when I got up to the front counter, he's got a bottle of wine. And he tried to pay for it, but he got ID'd. And he didn't have any ID on him. And he looks really young. So they couldn't sell it to him. Meanwhile, this guy has his own brand of ice wine. He could have grabbed a bottle of it off the shelf and said, hey, I'm Patrick Chan. But he just kind of looked mortified and embarrassed. And the cashier, who was just doing their job, told his girlfriend that if she wanted to buy the alcohol, he would have to leave the store. So he did, and I've been telling this story ever since, and now you know. Each week I show you an artifact that I think is an important part of BC's history. This one is a not super rare collectible beer bottle from a Prince George brewery called Tartan Brewing, which was owned by a dude named Ben Ginter, who my grandma Rose actually worked for back in the day. Mr. Ginter was a boisterous, controversial, fairly successful businessman who made it his mission to take on the big breweries of the day in the 60s and the 70s, and he did so by creating a persona of Uncle Ben, shown on this bottle, wearing what may or may not have been a fake beard. From there, he went on to piss them off as much as he possibly could. His competitors, he pissed them right off. This was before the craft beer revolution, when the beer market was ruled by a handful of big players: Labatt, Molson, and Carling O'Keefe. They all made similar, we'll call it drinkable beer, and the varieties were hardly discernible from each other in taste and profile. In fact, if you asked somebody what type of beer they liked back then, they probably would have said a brand, not a style like an IPA or a Pilsner or a sour. In fact, if you asked a worker at the liquor store for a sour or a fruit beer, you probably would have been asked to leave. What Ben Ginter did was marketing genius, knocking off the big brands with branding that was similar to theirs but not exactly the same. For example, he made a beer called Bud with 2 Ds. He had a bunch of cease and desist orders, and he made it into the news a lot. Uncle Ben ended up closing his brewery in 1978. He passed away from a heart attack in 1982, and what his brewery became is now Caribou. We're gonna go to break, and when we get back, I'm gonna talk to one of my favorite authors of all time. My guest today is the author of multiple books which look at the history of the nightlife, as well as the seedy underbelly of Vancouver and stories of how it's been policed over the decades. From the complete history of the Penthouse and the Commodore Ballroom to the last gang in town that shares the seldom told stories of the gangs that used to rule Vancouver's public parks. When you read a book by Aaron Chapman, you'll not only hear some fascinating tales, but you'll also be transported back in time to the years that they happened. His phone is full of numbers of people you wouldn't want to bump into in the street. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Bob. It's wonderful to be here. Great to see you again.
Nice to see you. Very nice to see you. Now, this book, The Last Gang in Town, I said it in the intro that gangs used to rule the parks. I don't think most people know about the park gangs.
It was something that was happening in the 60s and 70s in Vancouver, and if you're a Vancouverite of probably of a certain vintage, you'll remember those years, but they're kind of long gone, and gangs and the nature of organized crime changed in the early 80s quite a bit, that we're sort of left what we have today, and the gangs of those eras are much different in terms of the criminal makeup they are today. But a lot of the people who are now the heads of some of the bigger gangs and criminal organizations in Vancouver got their start in those years.
You don't say.
Yeah.
So the gangs were kind of, I think you might say this in the book, disorganized crime?
It wasn't organized crime, it was disorganized crime. Yeah. That was the thing. And you know, it wasn't as though these organizations and these groups who never really had that much structure to them. These were street gangs. A lot of these guys were sort of street kids who sort of assembled around neighborhood parks because it was easier to sometimes hang out in the park with your buddies some nights when mom and dad were fighting, and then maybe be home, you know, and whatnot. So juvenile delinquents were made up a lot of these things. But again, things progressed and things got worse, and the police in the early 70s went to combat them in a way they've never done before or since, so heavily, and so in a secret way as well. And that's what that book gets into.
Yeah, what triggered that?
Interestingly enough, the Rolling Stones coming to town. The Rolling Stones concert, Exile on Main Street. The kickoff of the tour happened right here in Vancouver, which was a big deal back then. We didn't really necessarily have, you know, BC Place or anything like that. You know, a lot of these tours back then would start in New York or Los Angeles. It's a big deal Vancouver had that. At that show, there was a huge riot. If you went to the show, you'd walk out and you saw a lot of broken glass and police cars everywhere, and you might not have known what had happened. But there was a huge riot outside of people that not only wanted to get into the show, but some people who probably wanted to cause trouble and this and that. And the Vancouver Police Department blamed it on the Clark Park gang. Right around 14th and Main, or 14th and Commercial.
The park is still there,
The park is still there. You could still go there and whatnot. And it's interesting that the police blamed it on them. And what they did is they formed a secret gang task force called the H Squad to go after the gang. And again, some of the details had really never been published or talked about before, and I've tracked down some old gang squad members as well as old Clark Park gang members who sort of tell their story for the first time. And it makes one of the most, to me, one of the craziest and most fascinating stories that's ever happened in the city of Vancouver before.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't even know about the gangs before I read this book.
That's
and
it.
It seems almost like the Warriors, and the way you write it also is very engaging.
I thank you.
And
Yeah.
I just love it. Do you ever feel unsafe when you're researching?
You know, I can recall a conversation. I got a phone call from a certain group of people that wanted to know what I was poking around about, and that was a little worrisome. I went to meet somebody who had just gotten out of prison for doing 25 years for murder, and I wasn't necessarily sure what I was walking into. So I called my brother and I said, "Listen, if you don't hear from me in 2 hours, this is the person I talked to, and this is where I was last at."
Wow, yeah.
And he was sort of surprised. And as soon as I got there, I realized this guy was quite a gentleman in an odd way.
Yeah.
Very friendly, very easy to talk to. In fact, I had such a good time talking to him. We talked for about 3 hours, and I realized what the time was, and I had to rush to step out and use the phone and call my brother and say, "Look, don't worry." I totally had forgotten. Everything's fine. But every once in a while, people, you know, there's every once in a while something that comes up. But people, I think, it's funny because when that book came out, I had a number of people, retired Vancouver Police Department people. The book came out around Christmas that year, and said, "Geez, Aaron, every ex-cop in the city got your book and they loved it. They thought you were very fair."
It was very relevant. And it was revealing of
yeah,
these sort of
and I was a little bit
stuff.
surprised because we get into quite a controversial period in time with the Vancouver Police Department history. But he said it was great. "I'm hearing from people I haven't talked to in years. It's great." About 2 days after that, on Boxing Day or so, I got a little after that, I got a call from some of the gang members. And they said, "Geez, every gang member and biker in this city got your book for Christmas, and they love it." So
Boxing Day, you spent your Boxing Day on the phone with gangsters.
Yeah, and whatnot. I get a Christmas card from some of them even today. It's quite remarkable. I enjoyed talking to the police and talking about the history, and they were quite honest and upfront with me. I had to change a couple names because some of these people now have nieces or nephews or grandsons in the police department. They don't necessarily want their career affected by that. But likewise with some of the gangsters who said, "I've kind of moved on in life now," or "Things have changed," and or "I don't want to necessarily upset anybody. Maybe you can change my name." But that only happened in a couple of cases and whatnot. But it's been interesting. That book has been now optioned, and they're trying to sort of market it to one of the the Netflixes or the Amazons of the world. So maybe we'll see one day we'll see
I would love
movie
it.
or
I
a
would
TV
be an
series.
extra in that. Can you put in
let's
a
do
word
it
for me?
Let's do it. Can you be
Okay.
a heavy or a drug dealer or a cop or something like that?
Either or.
Okay, we're working on it. I'll talk to the scriptwriter.
Can I wear maybe I'll be an undercover. I can wear a Mac jacket.
That's it. We all got to get our red Mac jackets
Yes.
out and be extras for that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are you working on now?
I'm working on. I'm just finishing a book about Doug and the Slugs, a legendary Vancouver band.
Criminals.
Not so much criminals. It probably more have to do with the Commodore book or the Penthouse book in terms of city entertainment or Vancouver After Dark,
Right.
And whatnot. There's a book project in England with a band called the Men That Couldn't Hang. That just had their 40th anniversary. I was over there and we're working on something with them. And then there's a book on Vancouver restaurant history. That's probably a couple years away.
You got 3 books you're working on.
I'm working on three books right now. I have to keep.
What's next? What one's coming out next?
The Doug and the Slugs book.
Doug and the Slugs.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for
My
your
pleasure.
time.
Yeah.
We're gonna go to a commercial break and then we're gonna come back and Nina's gonna be talking to people on the street. Welcome back to Now You Know BC. We're gonna go to the street where Nina is talking to people about booze. Nina.
I'm Nina Savage, and this is Street Survey. Today we're here on the iconic Granville Strip, where I've had my fair share of fun, and I know you have too. So let's hear your stories. What would you rate Vancouver's nightlife out of 10?
3. Probably like a 4 out of 10. I don't think it's necessarily the best.
I'll say 6.
Okay.
I think it's one of the best cities in Canada with the night life.
Obviously, the adventurous side is amazing, the mountains and things like that. But then it also has really good bars and things. So if you're looking for just somewhere where you can chill rather than go out and sort of have a crazy club night, then it's good for that.
I mean, Vancouver is very much I feel like a morning canoe on the water, or just like a morning place. But I feel like if we got the nightlife out there, there'd be a lot more people and I don't know, I think we'd be more friendly. Because we are friendly as Canadians, but there's so many people and nobody talks to each other. So let's get people out. Let's get people happy again, going out after COVID.
And what's your favorite bar in Vancouver?
Probably any of the Irish bars. It makes me feel like I'm near home, so.
Never go to Granville for nightlife.
Okay.
I would say Fairmont Pack Rim lobby bar.
Okay.
All sorts of people from out of town. Park, really good. Yeah, like D6. Yeah.
Red Truck's a decent time over out Olympic Village Way. There's actually a bunch in Mount Pleasant that are really good. 33 Acres is another one of my faves. Steamworks is over there too, out, sort of Olympic Village, Mount Pleasant Way, and I would say those are the best ones.
Because they're like each day has the best place. So Fridays rec room, Saturdays studio. I also like raves, the industrial and Bantec. They're like a kind of factories. They make the raves in the factories, huge factories. But I can recommend you studio and rec room.
What do you order when you go to the bar? What's your top drink?
For me, tequila.
Tequila?
Yeah, of course. Raised and born in Mexico, so that's why.
And what's your least favorite drink?
Least favorite, the vodka.
Okay. And what causes the worst hangover for you?
The vodka. That's why I don't like it.
We'll do a rapid fire round. I'll name a type of alcohol and you can say your favorite brand or like your favorite type. Like if I say beer, you could say lager, or you could say a specific brewery if you have one. Okay, you ready?
Sounds good.
Beer.
Ooh, Peroni.
Lager.
Lager.
All right. Wine.
Rosé.
Prisoner. Red.
Wine. Pinot Noir.
Cider.
Oh, I don't drink cider.
No cider. Absolutely nothing. Apple? I don't know.
Sundays plum cider.
Spirit.
Vodka.
Gin.
Tequila.
Finally, cooler.
I don't drink those.
Like probably a vodka lime soda or something like that.
Coors has got a good one. Coors Seltzer. They're like 0 sugar and they taste better than White Claw.
I think they're cheaper too.
Yeah, no, they're really good.
Clearly, I've hit a nerve. Vancouverites just want to have fun. City of Vancouver, make it happen. This is Street Survey, and I'm Nina Savage.
We're going on a BC road trip to Victoria, British Columbia. If you're a regular CHEK viewer, you might live in Victoria and you might think that this is the most basic and hilarious roundup of things to do in your fair city that you've ever heard. And I'm okay with that because, like I always say, this is my show and I'll tell you whatever I want. If you're heading to Victoria for the first time and you don't want to pay a premium for staying at the absolutely haunted and beautiful Empress Hotel, I usually stay at one of 2 spots that are spitting distance from it. First is the Inn at Laurel Point, which is your kind of standard, fancy, modern hotel right on the water, close to the Helijet terminal if you're splurging and you're flying over there. They have a fabulous brunch. They were recently renovated. This is a great, great spot. My second one, and my favorite option, is the Parkside, which is just a couple blocks up from the water, tucked away. It's a 3-minute walk to downtown. I mean, it's right there. And they have suites that are more like apartments. They've got a little cafe that also serves beers and ciders. And most importantly, they have hundreds of resident koi that live in a water feature that goes from the inside of the lobby, connects to the outside. If you're nice, or if you're a child, they'll let you feed these. Get settled, put your walking shoes on, and head to the Royal BC Museum. This is where you're gonna learn all about BC and its natural history and the history of its people. I've been to Victoria a ton of times, and this is still the first stop that I make, always. When you're done there, go outside the front doors, straight onto Government Street. This is the main shopping area with tons of tourist shops where you can buy a t-shirt that has an image of a bear chasing a tourist on it, or an authentic Cowichan sweater that was knitted by members of the Cowichan tribe on island. Next, pop in for a pint at the Barden Banker pub, which will bring you back to the 1800s with its carpet and brass, stained glass. Then make your way to Pagliacci's, which is apparently pronounced Pagliacci's. It's like the old spaghetti factory if it were a little nicer and a little more crowded, and everybody who's watching Victoria right now is rolling their eyes. This is my show, I do what I want. To end your night, walk up to the Royal Athletic Park and take in a Victoria Harbour Cats baseball game. I bet you didn't even know they had baseball there. The team is a part of the WCL, which is the collegiate league. They have a bunch of teams from the US and a couple others in BC, and watching a game is a fantastic experience. The last time I went to one of their games was Jersey Off Our Backs night, where everybody in the crowd got a raffle ticket And then at the end of the game, they drew names and the players literally handed the winners their game-worn jerseys off their backs, like 30 players. It was amazing. That's how to spend your super touristy first trip to Victoria. I hope this show doesn't get canceled by the folks at CHEK, who might have their heads in their hands right about now. Enjoy your BC road trip. Welcome back to Now You Know BC. I'm gonna give something away, but first a story about a super interesting British Columbian you may never have heard of. Did you know that there's a guy from BC who is equally as interesting as the most interesting man in the world from those Mexican beer commercials? And who I wish was still alive so I could have a beer with him? It's true, and he was actually in the most played Raisin Bran commercial of all time. If you're older than 30, you've probably seen it. The logger in that commercial is an actor named John Bear Curtis, who you may have never heard of before. Born in the Northwest Territories, he spent time in Ontario before landing a job in Barkerville in the 1970s as an actor who played a cowboy. When you pay admission to go into the gold rush town of Barkerville, BC, it's immersive with people dressed in elaborate costumes that you mingle with and who never break character. For my last TV show, we actually hired a few of them to play out a Billy Barker scene in the saloon, and I got to play a bartender. After Barkerville, he served as the horseback security at a UN conference that was held at Jericho Beach in Vancouver in 1976. The Habitat Forum was the first of its kind, and it revolved around human settlements, and it ended up having a global impact on housing. But it was here that he guarded then Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau's kids. That's Justin Trudeau on the horse with him there. He also rounded out his work by doing security at the Commodore Ballroom and at Expo 86. He was 6 feet 8 inches tall, and he loved music and trading antiques, and his most recognizable role was as Sturdy Danny McGee in the Raisin Bran commercial from 1985. And as his family tells me, it came back to help him in the year of his death. It was more than 20 years after the commercial first aired when Kellogg's randomly started playing it on TV again. His family reached out to the company, who said that they were actually trying to reach him because they had money to give him for the royalties. That helped him pay for his medical bills before he sadly passed away in 2007. Rest in peace, John Bear Curtis, also known as Sturdy Danny McGee. And now you know. I'm giving away one of these BC dogwood hats that I designed and which were embroidered in a shop called True North Screen Printing in South Vancouver. They were embroidered, they were not screen printed. To be entered to win, simply sign up for my newsletter at bcbob.ca, where I will be randomly selecting a winner. That's the show for this week. Big thanks to Aaron Chapman, Chad Hellenius, and everybody at the Exploration Place in Prince George, to the family of John Bear Curtis, and lastly, thank you to everybody that works at liquor stores in BC that have to, by law, card people, like Patrick Chan, that they know damn well are older than 19 years old. For more stories, you can follow me on Instagram. Just search for BC Bob. Check out my merch at bcbob.ca and watch more episodes of this show on CHEK Plus. I'll see you next week when we'll explore more stories about this great province of ours. And now you know BC.
Now You Know BC is brought to you by Return It. Don't trash your empty beverage containers, return them for the deposit refund.